The bridge of the TDF Valkyrie hummed with quiet activity as the massive ship drifted through the outer reaches of human space. Admiral Jake Morrison stood before the main view screen, his weathered hands clasped behind his back as he watched. The stars. The year 2347 had been quiet so far, with no major conflicts threatening the colonies. Morrison preferred it that way, but experience had taught him that peace never lasted long in their corner of the galaxy dot behind him. Communications. Officer Lisa Patterson worked at her station, monitoring the endless stream of signals that flowed between human worlds. She was young for her rank, barely 30, but she had an ear for alien transmissions that made her invaluable to the fleet. Her fingers danced across the controls as she filtered through the usual traffic of merchant vessels and patrol reports. "Admiral?" Patterson called out, her voice tight with concern. "I'm picking up something unusual on the long-range array." "It's not human, sir." Morrison turned from the view screen, his gray eyes focusing on the communications officer. "What kind of signal, Lieutenant?" "It's a distress call, but the frequency is all wrong. The language patterns don't match anything in our database." Patterson's brow furrowed as she worked to clean up the transmission. "Wait, there's a translation matrix embedded in the signal. They're trying to talk to us." The bridge fell silent, except for the soft hum of the ship's systems. Morrison walked over too. Patterson's station, his boots echoing on the metal deck. "Put it through the speakers." The voice that emerged from the communication system was unlike anything the human crew had heard before. It was melodic, almost musical, but filled with terror and desperation. The translation matrix struggled to convert the alien words into English, creating a stilted but understandable message. "This is Chancellor Zev Tai of the Zephyrian Coalition. Our worlds are under attack. The Vorthan Empire has broken the peace treaties. They have invaded our space with a massive fleet. Our defenses are failing. We have lost 3 colonies already. Our military cannot stop them. We broadcast this message to all civilizations who can hear us. Please, we need help. Our children are dying. Our cities burn. If anyone receives this transmission, please respond. We are located in the Kepler 442 system in the Outer Rim. Time is running out." The message repeated 3 times before falling. Silent, Morrison stood motionless for a long moment, processing what he had heard. Around the bridge, his crew waited for orders. They all knew about the Zephyrians, of course. The peaceful alliance of 3 species had made contact with humanity 5 years ago, offering trade agreements and scientific cooperation. They were known throughout the galaxy as brilliant engineers and philosophers, but their military was designed for defense only. Captain Ryan Brooks, Morrison's tactical advisor, approached from the weapons station. He was a tall man with sharp features and the kind of analytical mind that made him excellent at predicting enemy movements. "Admiral, I've been running calculations. The Kepler 442 system is over 800 light-years from our current position. Even at maximum hyperspace velocity, it would take us 6 days to reach them." Morrison nodded slowly. "What do we know about the Vorthans?" "Militaristic empire based in the Gamma sector," Brooks replied immediately. "They've been expanding aggressively for the past 50 years. Their military doctrine focuses on overwhelming force and rapid conquest. Intelligence reports suggest they have around 300 capital ships and support vessels." Dr. Amanda Foster, the fleet's chief medical officer, stepped forward from her station near the rear of the bridge. She was a small woman with dark hair and kind eyes, but Morrison had seen her work miracles in the worst conditions imaginable. "Admiral, I've been reviewing the intelligence files on Vorthan occupation tactics. They don't just conquer worlds. They harvest the populations for biological experiments. The survivors are used as slave labor in their industrial complexes." The bridge crew exchanged grim looks. Everyone knew what that meant. If the Zephyrians fell to the Vorthans, it wouldn't just be a military defeat. It would be genocide. Morrison walked back to the center of the bridge, his mind racing through the possibilities. The Zephyrians were 800 light-years away, in a region of space that was barely mapped by human explorers. The Third Fleet under his command consisted of 12 dreadnoughts, 47 destroyers, and various support vessels carrying 30,000 of humanity's finest soldiers and spacers. It was a formidable force, but deploying it so far from human space would be incredibly risky. "Sir?" Patterson called out from her station. "I'm receiving follow-up transmissions from the Zephyrian system. The situation is deteriorating rapidly. They're reporting orbital bombardment of their outer colonies." Morrison closed his eyes for a moment, remembering the first time he had met a Zephyrian delegation. They had been so different from humans, with their tall, slender frames and large, expressive eyes. But they had approached humanity with genuine curiosity and friendship, seeking to learn about human culture and share their own knowledge. They had never asked for military aid or protection. They had simply wanted to be friends. "Lieutenant Patterson," Morrison said, his voice carrying the authority of decades of command, "open a channel to all ships in the fleet." "Fleet-wide broadcast." "Channel open, sir." Morrison straightened his uniform and faced the communication pickup. His voice was steady and clear as he addressed his crews. "This is Admiral Morrison to all vessels of the Third Fleet. We have received a distress call from the Zephyrian Coalition. They are under attack by the Vorthan Empire and facing total annihilation. I am ordering immediate deployment to the Kepler 442 system to render assistance. All ships will begin hyperspace preparation within the hour. Department heads report to your commanding officers for briefing updates." Morrison out. He turned back to Patterson. "Send a reply to the Zephyrians. Tell them help is coming, and to hold their positions as long as possible." Patterson's fingers flew over her controls as she composed the response. The message was simple, but carried the weight of humanity's commitment. "Message sent, Admiral." Brooks stepped closer to Morrison, his expression concerned. "Sir, the route to Kepler 442 will take us through the Crimson Nebula. Most species consider that region impassable due to radiation storms and gravitational anomalies." Morrison smiled grimly. "Most species didn't evolve on Earth, Captain. Plot a course through the nebula. It's the fastest route, and time is something the Zephyrians don't have." Around the bridge, the crew began implementing his orders with the efficiency born of years of training and combat experience. Morrison returned to the view screen, watching as the first of his ships began powering up their hyperspace engines. In a few hours, the Third Fleet would be racing through some of the most dangerous space in the galaxy to help a species they barely knew. It was exactly the kind of impossible mission that humans specialized in. The Third Fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Crimson Nebula, and Commander Steve Miller felt his breath catch in his throat. From the bridge of the TDF Thunderbolt, the nebula stretched before them like a wall of red fire. Massive clouds of ionized gas swirled in violent patterns, shot through with lightning that could destroy a ship in seconds. Most civilizations had maps that simply marked this region as impassable and routed traffic around it, for good reason. "Sensors are going crazy, sir," reported Lieutenant Ben Carter from his station. "The electromagnetic interference is off. The charts, we're getting ghost readings everywhere." Miller nodded grimly. The Thunderbolt was a fast destroyer, built for scouting and rapid strikes. Today, it would serve as the pathfinder for the entire fleet, leading them through a maze that had killed thousands of ships over the centuries. "Navigation, plot us a course toward the center. We'll find the path of least resistance and mark it for the rest of the fleet." Behind him, Captain Nicole Roberts piloted the heavy cruiser TDF Ironclad through the nebula's outer edge. Her ship was built like a fortress, with thick armor plating and redundant systems designed to keep fighting even when everything went wrong. The radiation levels that would cook most alien crews alive barely registered on her instruments. Human ships were built tough because humans came from a world that tried to kill them every day. Engineering reports all systems nominal, called out Chief Petty Officer Alex Turner from his post. Radiation shielding is holding steady. We're designed for this kind of punishment. Roberts smiled as she watched the thunderbolt disappear into a swirling wall of crimson gas. That's what separates us from the rest of the galaxy. They see impossible. We see Tuesday. On the flagship Valkyrie, Admiral Morrison watched his fleet spread out in formation as they entered the nebula. The massive dreadnought shuddered as it hit the first radiation storm, but the shields held firm. Around them, smaller vessels of the Third Fleet pushed forward with the same determination that had carried humanity to the stars. Engineer Paul Garcia worked frantically in the Valkyrie's engine room as another gravitational wave hit the ship. The massive reactor core groaned under the stress, but Garcia and his team had dealt with worse. "Reroute power from the secondary generators," he shouted over the noise. "Boost the inertial dampeners. She can take it." Navigation Officer Claire Adams plotted their course from the bridge, her fingers dancing across holographic displays that showed the nebula's deadly landscape. Gravity wells from rogue planets pulled at their ships like hungry mouths. Radiation storms that could strip the atmosphere from a world raged around them. Most species would have turned back hours ago. "There," Adams called out, pointing to a narrow corridor between two massive gas clouds. "Gravitational readings are stable through that passage. It's barely wide enough for a destroyer, but we can make it work." Morrison leaned over her shoulder, studying the display. The passage she had found was like threading a needle while riding a hurricane, but it would save them 12 hours compared to going around the storm system. "Signal the fleet. All ships follow the thunderbolt through the corridor. Single file formation." The most dangerous moment came when they reached the section spacers called the graveyard. Here, the wrecks of hundreds of ships from dozens of civilizations drifted in the nebula's embrace. Some had been there so long that entire ecosystems of spaceborne creatures had made homes in their hulls. Others were recent enough that their emergency beacons still flashed weakly in the crimson darkness. "Movement in the debris field," reported Sensors Officer Beth Turner from her station on the Valkyrie. "I'm reading active energy signatures. Some of those wrecks still have functioning systems." Miller watched from the thunderbolt as ancient defense turrets emerged from the wreckage of a massive alien vessel. The weapons were old, probably left by a species that died out centuries ago, but they were still dangerous. Auto-targeting systems locked onto his ship as warning lights flashed. Across his bridge, "All ships, this is Thunderbolt Actual," Miller broadcast to the fleet. "We have hostile automated defenses in the graveyard. They're protecting the wrecks from salvagers. Most species would respect that and go around." Morrison's voice crackled. "Back over the communication system. Most species didn't evolve on a death world, Commander. Take us through. We don't have time to be polite to dead civilizations." The battle that followed was unlike anything in the tactical manuals. Human ships weaved between ancient wrecks while automated turrets fired weapons that had been old when humanity was still discovering fire. The destroyer TDF Ranger, commanded by Captain Tony Clark, took a direct hit from a plasma cannon that would have vaporized most alien vessels. Instead, Clark's ship shook off the blast and kept moving. "Hull breach on Deck 7, reported his damage control officer. "Emergency bulkheads are sealed. We're venting atmosphere, but the ship is holding together." Clark gripped his command chair as another blast rocked his vessel. "Emergency power to the engines." We're not stopping for some ancient security system. The Zephyrians need us. Captain Roberts in the ironclad took point, her heavily armored. Cruiser absorbing fire meant for the lighter vessels behind her. Her ship's weapons tore through century-old defense platforms with ruthless efficiency. Clear a path, she ordered her gunnery crews. Nothing stops this fleet. The automated defenses were designed to drive off scavengers and tomb robbers, not deal with humans who simply refuse to be stopped. One by one, the ancient turrets fell silent as the Third Fleet carved its way through the graveyard. Behind them, they left a trail of destroyed defense systems and the clear message that humanity would go through anything to help their friends Dot as they emerged from the worst of the graveyard. A new transmission reached them from Kepler 442b. The voice of Chancellor Zevtai was weaker now, filled with desperation and exhaustion. This is Kepler 442b to any vessels responding to our distress call. The Vorthan main fleet has arrived. We have lost orbital control. They are beginning bombardment of our cities. Our population centers are being destroyed. We estimate less than 48 hours before total planetary surrender. Please, if anyone is coming, we need you now. Miller stared at the communication display, his jaw clenched in determination. Around him, his bridge crew worked with quiet intensity. They had pushed through the impossible survived passage through the Crimson Nebula and fought their way past the Guardians of the Dead. But they still had 2 days of travel ahead of them. Signal the fleet. Morrison's voice came over the communication system. All ships increased to maximum hyperspace velocity. Engineering crews, I want every bit of power you can give me. We're not losing those people to some alien empire that thinks might makes right. The Third Fleet surged forward through the nebulas. Far edge, leaving behind the graveyard and its ancient secrets. Ahead lay open space, and then the Zephyrian system, where a peaceful civilization fought for its very survival. Behind them, the Crimson Nebula settled back into its eternal dance of destruction, marked now by the passage of humans who had done what everyone said was impossible. They had found a way through hell itself, because someone needed their help. The Third Fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442 system, and what they saw made every human on every bridge curse in languages from Earth. The beautiful blue-green world of the Zephyrians was surrounded by a massive alien fleet. Hundreds of Vorthan warships hung in space like hungry predators, their dark hulls bristling with weapons. Below them, the planet's surface glowed with the orange light of burning cities. Tactical analysis. Admiral Morrison ordered from the bridge of the Valkyrie. His voice was calm, but his hands gripped the command rail until his knuckles turned white. Captain Ryan Brooks worked frantically at his station, counting enemy vessels and analyzing their positions. Sir, I count 237. Vorthan ships. Their main battle fleet is in high orbit conducting orbital bombardment. They have screening forces protecting the flanks and rear. Small attack craft are hunting down refugee ships trying to escape the planet. Morrison watched. A tactical display as red dots marked each enemy vessel. By every rule of space warfare, his fleet was outnumbered almost 4-1. The smart move would be to call for reinforcements and plan a careful campaign. But the Zephyrians didn't have time for smart moves. They needed a miracle. All ships, this is Admiral Morrison, he broadcast to his fleet. The enemy has superior numbers and position. They expect us to probe their defenses or attempt a flanking maneuver. Instead, we're going to do what humans do best. We're going to hit them so hard they forget their own names. All vessels, full attack speed directly at their center formation. Ramming speed if necessary. The response from his ship captains was immediate and enthusiastic. Captain Nicole Roberts in the Ironclad was the first to respond. Copy that, Admiral. Time to show these aliens why Earth is classified as a death world. The Vorthen fleet commanders watched in confusion as the small human force accelerated directly toward their strongest concentration of ships. In their experience, inferior forces tried to avoid battle or use clever tactics to even the odds. They had never fought an enemy that solved problems by hitting them harder than physics should allow. Commander Steve Miller led the first wave of fighters, his squadron of 12 small craft racing ahead of the main fleet. The Vorthen point defense systems opened fire, filling space with deadly energy beams. Most pilots would have tried to avoid the incoming fire. Miller flew straight through it. "Target the command ships," he ordered his pilots over the communication system, the big ones with all the antenna arrays. "If we can cut off their communications, the rest of their fleet will panic." Lieutenant Danny Rodriguez followed Miller through a wall of plasma fire that would have reduced most alien craft to atoms. His fighter shook as energy blasts passed close enough to heat his hull plating red hot. "This is insane," he muttered to himself, then grinned. "I love this job." The main battle began when the human dreadnoughts reached weapons range. The TDF Valkyrie opened fire with every gun she carried, sending streams of hypervelocity rounds and energy beams into the closest Vorthen battleship. The alien vessel's shields flared and collapsed under the focused assault. Secondary explosions rippled along its hull as human weapons found their mark. Captain Tony Clark brought the damaged destroyer Ranger into the fight, despite his ship's injuries from the Nebula passage. Half his weapons were offline, and his armor was cracked, but he refused to stay out of the battle. "All remaining guns, target that cruiser on our starboard side. Show them what Earth ships are made of." The Vorthen fleet tried to respond with their usual tactics of coordinated fire and defensive formations. But human ships didn't fight like other species. They charged into close range, where their heavier armor and redundant systems gave them advantages. They took damage that would cripple alien vessels and kept fighting. Lieutenant Colonel Maria Santos led the first boarding action when her Marines blasted their way into a Vorthen heavy cruiser. The aliens inside had never faced humans in close combat before. They discovered too late that creatures from a death world fought with the savagery that millions of years of evolution had bred into their bones. "Deck 3 secured," Santos reported as her Marines advanced through the alien ship's corridors. "These Vorthens are tough, but they don't know how to fight dirty." Moving to the engine room. The turning point came when Commander Kevin Wright realized the Vorthen's critical weakness. His destroyer squadron had been hammering at a formation of enemy ships with little success, until he noticed something important about their movement patterns. "All ships, this is right," he broadcast on the fleet tactical channel. "The Vorthens are using centralized command protocols. Watch their formations when we destroy a command ship. They lose coordination for almost 30 seconds, while the next ship in line takes over." Morrison immediately saw the opportunity. "All vessels, priority. Targeting on ships with heavy communication arrays. Break their command structure, and we break their fleet." The human ships concentrated their fire on the Vorthen command vessels, creating chaos in the enemy formation as ship after ship lost its connection to the fleet's command structure. Without clear orders, individual Vorthen captains hesitated or made conflicting decisions. The disciplined alien fleet began to fall apart. The battle's climax came when the flying Vorthen admiral realized his fleet was losing. Rather than accept defeat, he ordered his flagship to ram directly into Kepler 442b's surface. The massive dreadnought turned toward the planet, its engines burning at full power. If it hit, the impact would kill millions of Zephyrians and render large parts of the world uninhabitable. Morrison watched the enemy flagship accelerating toward the planet and made a decision that would be talked about in military academies for centuries. "All ships continue engaging the fleet. Admiral Morrison." To Shuttle Bay. Prepare my personal craft for immediate launch. Dr. Amanda Foster grabbed his arm as he headed for the exit. Jake, you can't board that ship alone. It's suicide. Morrison smiled grimly. Doctor, I'm not going alone. I'm taking a full Marine assault team, and we're not going to board it. We're going to take it. 15 minutes later, Morrison's shuttle blasted away from the Valkyrie, carrying 20 of humanity's deadliest warriors toward the Vorthan flagship. Behind them, the Third Fleet continued to tear apart the enemy formation with a kind of brutal efficiency that had made humans the most feared species in known space. The shuttle's pilot, Lieutenant Gary Walsh, weaved through point defense fire as they approached the enemy dreadnought. Docking bay is sealed, Admiral. We'll have to blast our way in, then blast away, Lieutenant. Those Zephyrians are counting on us, and I didn't come this far to let them down. The shuttle punched through the Vorthan ship's hull like a bullet, through paper, carrying Admiral Morrison and his Marines into the heart of the enemy flagship. The final battle for Kepler 442b was about to begin. Admiral Morrison's shuttle tore through the hull of the Vorthan flagship like a metal fist punching through paper. The 20 Marines with him were the best humanity had to offer, veterans of dozens of battles across human space. But as they stormed through the alien corridors, Morrison knew they were racing against time. Every second brought the massive ship closer to Kepler 442b's surface. The Vorthan crew fought back with weapons that could melt steel, but they had never faced humans in close combat before. Sergeant Pete Williams led the advance team, his assault rifle cutting down aliens who moved too slowly to understand human reflexes. These things are big, but they're not fast, he called out over the gunfire. Keep moving, stay together. Morrison pushed through the corridor behind his Marines, heading for the ship's bridge. The Vorthan flagship was huge, easily 3 times the size of any human vessel, but its design was all wrong for fighting boarding parties. The corridors were too wide, giving his Marines clear fields of fire. The aliens had built their ship for intimidation, not defense. Back in space, the Third Fleet was finishing what it had started. The Vorthan formation had collapsed completely after losing too many command ships. Individual alien vessels tried to fight or flee, but human ships hunted them down with ruthless efficiency. Captain Nicole Roberts brought the ironclad alongside a damaged Vorthan cruiser and pounded it into scrap metal. Target destroyed, she reported with satisfaction. Moving to assist the Ranger. Clark's ship is still in the fight, but he's taking heavy damage. Commander Steve Miller's fighter squadron had switched to search and rescue, hunting down Vorthan interceptors that were still chasing refugee ships. His pilots moved through the battle zone like sharks, protecting the fleeing Zephyrian civilians, with the same determination they had shown attacking the enemy fleet. On the flagship, Morrison reached the bridge access corridor and found it heavily defended. A dozen Vorthan warriors waited behind energy barriers, their weapons trained on the narrow passage. They were bigger than humans, with thick armor and natural weapons that could tear a person apart. But they had made one critical mistake. They thought like prey animals, setting up a defensive position and waiting for the attack to come to them. Morrison smiled grimly and pulled out a device that most alien species had banned from warfare centuries ago. Marines, clear the corridor. I'm using a breaching charge. The explosion that followed was enormous, far larger than necessary for the job. It collapsed half the corridor and left the Vorthan defenders stunned and scattered. Morrison led his Marines through the smoking wreckage before the aliens could recover. Sometimes the best tactic was just hitting something harder than anyone expected. The bridge of the Vorthan flagship was a massive chamber filled with control stations and display screens. At its center stood the alien admiral, a creature twice Morrison's height with 4 arms and armor that looked like it could stop a tank round. Around him, His bridge crew worked frantically to complete their suicide run into the planet below. Human. The Vorthan admiral spoke in perfect English, his voice filled with contempt. You cannot stop us. My ship will complete its mission even if you kill every warrior aboard. The impact will destroy your precious allies and show the galaxy what happens to those who oppose the Vorthan Empire. Morrison walked across the bridge, his sidearm drawn but pointed at the floor. His Marines spread out around the chamber, covering the alien crew members. You know what your problem is, Admiral? You think too small. You see one ship, one impact, one destroyed world. I see something much bigger. The alien commander gestured with one of his forearms, and Morrison could see the planet growing larger on the main screen. They had minutes before impact. Speak. Quickly, human. Your words will not save you or your alien friends. My words won't save them, Morrison agreed, then smiled. But my fleet will. The Vorthan admiral's confusion lasted exactly long enough for Morrison to draw his weapon and put 3 rounds center mass. The alien's armor absorbed most of the impact, but the force was enough to send him staggering backward. Morrison didn't waste time with a longer fight. He turned to the nearest control station and began working. Sergeant Williams, get your people. To the engine room. I need you to shut down the main reactor in 60 seconds. Morrison's fingers flew over the alien controls, his training in xenotechnology paying off. I'm reversing the course now, but without engine power, this ship is going to fall into the planet anyway. The Vorthan bridge crew tried to stop him, but 20 human Marines in a confined space was like releasing wild animals in a chicken coop. The aliens were big and strong, but humans were fast and mean and had been perfecting the art of violence. For millions of years, Williams reported back from the engine room 30 seconds later. Reactor is offline, Admiral. This ship is dead in space. Morrison watched the tactical display as his course corrections took effect. The massive Vorthan flagship was no longer aimed at the planet's surface. Instead, it would pass close enough to be captured by the world's gravity and enter a decaying orbit. Eventually, it would burn up in the atmosphere, but that would take days. Long enough for rescue ships to evacuate any survivors. 3 hours later, Morrison stood on the observation deck of the Valkyrie as it orbited the recovering Zephyrian homeworld. The alien planet was scarred by orbital bombardment, but it would survive. Refugee ships were already returning from their hiding places in the outer system. The Vorthan fleet was gone, scattered or destroyed by human fury. Dr. Amanda Foster approached with her medical report. Her teams had been working around the clock to treat both human and alien wounded. Casualty report, Admiral. We lost the destroyer ranger with all hands. Captain Clark refused evacuation orders when his ship's reactor went critical. 3 other vessels have major damage, but they'll make it home. Total human casualties are 1,043. Morrison nodded solemnly. Each number represented someone who would never see Earth again, someone who had died to save a species they barely knew. And the Zephyrians? Their losses are severe, but not catastrophic. Chancellor Zivdai estimates they'll need 10 years to rebuild, but their civilization will survive. They're calling it the miracle of Kepler 442b. They want to name their largest city after you. Name it after Captain Clark, Morrison replied quietly. He's the one who held the line when it mattered most. Communications Officer Lisa Patterson approached with a datapad full of incoming messages. Admiral, we're receiving diplomatic contact requests from 37 different civilizations. Word of what we did here is spreading across the galaxy. Everyone wants to talk to the humans who can cross the Crimson Nebula and defeat the Vorthan Empire. Morrison looked out at the stars and thought about the future. Humanity had spent centuries fighting among themselves, learning to survive on a world that wanted them dead. Now they had proven that those same skills made them the most dangerous protectors the galaxy had ever seen. Set course for home, Lieutenant Patterson, but monitor all emergency frequencies. If someone needs help, we'll find a way to get there. Ugh. Third Fleet turned toward human space, leaving behind a grateful civilization and carrying the message that would echo across 1,000 worlds. When monsters threaten the innocent, call for the humans. They would find a way through hell itself to help.